I was wondering.
Technically, it takes you 4. It is 1 minute. All right. It is December 19th, 5:45 p.m. and we're going to call the Finance Committee meeting to order. Present are council members Barker, Hottinger, Hauser, Marmy, and Labuda sitting in for Lang. First item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $1,900.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. The fire division had a vehicle repair that they paid for out of pocket, and then they got reimbursed through their insurance, so they'd like to be able to appropriate that fund or that money into their vehicle maintenance funds.
Second. Motion by Barker, second by Labuda. Questions and or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor send us on full council, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Director. Okay, the next 3 items on the agenda, we won't actually be voting on, but we will be discussing the budgets. And just want to talk about them one at a time. And we will first start out with the general fund budget. I'll let our auditor go ahead and open up.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In front of you is a balanced budget for calendar year 2023. I'll highlight just a few items. If there's individual questions, and those police chief is here, Tina from the fire department is here as well. If there's any specific questions, always the big item in the capital improvements, there is for street maintenance, $900,000. If you tack it on with Brian's estimated gas tax, it should be about $1.7 million available for paving. I know there was, I want to just get off the point for just a second. I know there's been some talk about maybe allocating some alley paving money. Doesn't matter to me, not my decision, but I will tell you procedurally, come back and do a disappropriation appropriation. We don't even need you to do anything tonight. If you do want to add it, we can create an object code and do that. Once the budget's passed, come back and do that if you want to take a certain amount of money for alley paving. I know that's been of interest to Mr. Hauser. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, we don't need to do it tonight as part of the budget. We'll need to pass this as is.
Right. The thing that I explained is that the way that the budget's set up, we have specific categories in our budget. We don't pass them by line item necessarily. And as far as capital improvements and like the street maintenance, I've also talked with the auditor and the mayor. We did find an additional $100,000 that I'm going to make an amendment tonight to add that will be moved then into the street maintenance. But if you listen to what the amendment that I'm making it into a general category, and then it'll just be put into that street maintenance from our auditor's office. We do that so then the auditor's office doesn't have to follow legislation every single week in, week out, and moving things from one line item to another. Now, of course, anybody on council can monitor all the different accounts individually and making sure of that. Plus, annually, I can tell you that I monitor that, what's been spent in the previous year based on what was budgeted last year and then also was budgeted this year. I do that comparison. I know there's a couple of others on council that do that. So that's the direction. If we were to make it specific for that, then a separate line item would have to be developed, and we'd have to have the auditor's office literally create a separate account. Even then, without specific legislation mandating them that it can only be spent on pavement of alleyways, it's still an administrative decision on what they would spend that on, and they could move those funds. So that's what it would take in order to mandate it, would be specific legislation or to do that. Correct me if I'm wrong in anything that I said.
Correct, yes.
So,
And I have a few copies here. In the general fund, after, we cover the debt service, bailouts for the TIF projects, cover the leases, and after the street maintenance, it's going to leave you about $165,000 in the unappropriated amount of the capital improvements. So that's pretty strong. So I know I haven't seen that in any recent years, this much money towards paving. So I think that's very positive. I will point out, I've talked to a few members within the safety. You'll notice the services is up about another 100,000. Just keep in mind that is for the humane agent that was passed by council that we moved some money earlier this year for. So you do see a larger number compared to last year. Judicial needed a little bit more money for the interpreter that comes in with the court system. There's $250,000 as last year that went into the rainy day fund in addition to our monthly payments. So I think overall it's a very strong budget. Is there any questions for me? You can do my best to answer them for you.
I'll also point out a couple of things that the law director's budget went up pretty significantly, but they picked up another municipality. So that income has to be put into their budget so then they can move it where they need to. So it isn't like they're just increasing their budget. They're increasing their revenue, and that revenue has to be spent in their line items. So you'll see a difference there. There was another area that we identified in the fire department that there was an item that the chief budgeted for that we're going to move that. It's really more of a capital improvement. So I'm going to have another amendment tonight to move that out of the general fund budget, and it'll end up in a capital improvement because it's more of a capital improvement expense.
And to that point, Mr. Marmy, I feel very confident with David running the show on that. For that problem is specifically some of the Florida Station 1 is coming up, but I am pretty confident in talking to a few folks that $80,000 is going to be quite a bit less. So I think it's going to leave good capital improvements. So I think that was a very large number that's going to work out more money in the capital improvements budget. So that being said, I feel it's a very strong budget. Appreciate your support.
Any other questions from anyone about the general fund budget?
I just had one question, and Ryan, I know we talked about this earlier, but with the line item for overtime of $750,000 for the firefighters.
Yep.
How exactly was that number arrived at? I guess I'm just curious.
It was based on this year. Keep in mind, I know we spoke about it, Michael. There was $250,000 with the market funds last year for overtime. So it was based on last year's numbers. So I believe the mayor's pretty confident with the fire chief and that he's going to do his best to manage that overtime. So again, this budget's a snapshot, but it's going to give you a pretty darn good start for overtime for the year. So.
Yeah, what was spent as of the beginning of the month was a little over $500,000 in overtime for the firefighters. you tack on that 250,000, they're close to 800,000 in this year, what they'll spend in overtime dollars. But it's only going to show up in the auditor's office as only being 500 some thousand, close to 600,000 possibly by the time it closes out at the end of the year. But it doesn't show that 250,000 in there.
So, and I get to one other point, I would say in conclusion, so this is passed tonight, it's gonna leave the unappropriated balance of the general fund around 1.6 million. We took it a little bit higher, there's gonna be raises with asking with police, so it could be for 500,000, so that would be $1.2 million to operate. You know, it's not already funded the budget, so.
Very good. Any other questions? Anything in the budget? I want to thank you. I tell you what, there were more notes and everything and comments this year. I really appreciated that as far as going through the budget. Jackie, of course, always does a great job. But I think that the departments also responded to her very, very well this year, and it got her all the information. And I really appreciate that because it was pretty clean as far as being able to explain every little difference that I identified. And I want to know your office did a great job, and so did all the departments in getting the information into the office.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I want to thank Jim Wyson, as always, does a wonderful job. You have great notes from all the department heads who are coming in, so we can better answer your questions. I was like this.
All right, so again, we don't vote on that in committee. It's going to be voted on tonight, utilizing Rule 11. Next, we'll go to the other fund budget. Were there any questions on any of those? This is the all others that are, yes.
Hi, Kevin Garber, President and Firefighters in Golden. I just had one question about the capital improvements. budget.
We're on the all others budget.
Yeah, that's on page
Okay.
4,
Okay,
Fund 335 capital improvements. And this just made me not understanding how to read this report.
sure.
But it shows total fund capital improvements 21.5 million, give or take. The top line shows 20.7 million for in the engineering department. I was wondering if there was any more specifics on what that was going to be spent on capital improvements was.
Which line item?
It's page 4 of the all other fund legislation.
Right.
About Fund 335 capital improvements for part 122 engineering shows 20,760,000.
Projects. It's just the various projects in the engineer's office.
Projects.
Yeah, I mean, that's where all the paving, all the bridges, everything goes through the engineer's office as far as any kind of projects in the city with all of that. That all goes through his department and that budget, the capital improvements budget.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I do have a question on the budget that we're talking about. currently. The SID, maybe David could answer, excuse me, Mr. Rhodes could answer that question for me. The 115,000, is that towards the employees that take care of the SID?
115,000.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
any other questions? Only all others. All right, then we'll move on to the grants budget. Does anyone have any questions about that particular budget? Yes.
Um. In in terms of the budget, the grant budget and the engineering budget, since we haven't started on some of these projects, have they count toward this year's budget or next?
Which projects?
Like the bridge and that sort of thing.
That wouldn't be, this is grants for like economic development, all of those. Most of the grants, like for the bridge and everything, that came in as a one-time, and that's usually not budgeted for, like in that particular one. It came through as a special thing and then voted on council and moved into an account. These are mainly like salaries and positions and programs within the city that are funded through grants. And that's what our grant budget is based upon, but it'll be based upon 2023 year and those expenditures for that year.
Okay, and is that out of the COVID fund?
No, that's not a grant. That's separate from our grants.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, my pleasure. And that was Rochelle
Oh,
Bowles.
I'm sorry.
No, you're fine, you're fine. The grants budget, I can also just kind of share. That budget is, I mean, even if we try to scrutinize it or question it, the state and wherever we're getting the grant funds really dictated even more than what we're capable of doing as a legislative body. We pretty much just have to follow the rules with the grants budget. There isn't a whole lot that we can do outside of that. The different departments that utilize grants on an annual basis for funding, they have specific guidelines. And if they don't abide by them, then the grant money that was provided, they have to pay back. So they definitely abide by the rules or else they won't get the money and they can't utilize it. So that's probably the easiest budget that we have to deal with in the city. Okay. Very good. If there's no other questions, again, we will be invoking Rule 11. And as I indicated, there are a couple amendments, and it's basically the additional $100,000 that's going to be put into street maintenance. And then the fire, we're moving the 80,000 out of the general fund, and it'll end up moving into it as a capital improvement. And as our auditors stated, hopefully it won't cost 80,000 to do those repairs to Station 1, and we might even have more funds available in capital improvements. With that, this finance committee meeting stands adjourned. Oh, wait a minute. I did forget to tell you what the unappropriated balance was. And don't want to fail you all on that. So the unappropriated balance of the general fund is $61,912, and the budget stabilization fund stands at $1,129,836. And with that, this finance committee meeting stands adjourned.
All right, we'll call the we'll call the service committee meeting to order. Those present are myself, Rath, Harris, Barker, Klein, and Hunter. Before we get started on the legislation, I will let you know that we got two items at the discretion of the chair to discuss at the end. After the legislation, it will be an update on the block system contract as well as an update on the Cherry Valley Bridge.
I'll give you an update on West Main also.
Very, very nice. Very nice. So up first, we have ordinance 22-55, an ordinance changing the zoning classification of certain real property generally described as 293 Merchant Street, parcel number 054-250-128-00.000, City of Newark, Licking County, Ohio, from that of single family residence, RM, medium density district to TFR 2 family residence district, zoning code of the City of Newark, Ohio. Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As usual, I ask that these get passed on the planning commission. So we can take an in-depth look at it and give you an opinion on it, whether we support it or not.
Motion.
Motion by Hodger. Seconded by Blind. Questions from the committee? Mr. Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Rhodes, I'm assuming. I've looked this up to see where it is. This to me looks like it could be a case of spot zoning.
Could be.
Okay.
You know, everybody's allowed to make an application for the there's a process that's held the same for everybody. We don't encourage these changes. People bring them to us, so we're gonna take a look at it. We'll come back with that opinion.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of passing this on to council and ultimately the planning commission, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Will pass to the vote 5-0. Up next, resolution 22-57, an ordinance changing the zoning classification of certain real property generally described as 1401 Mount Vernon Road. Parcel tax ID number 054-269934-00.003. City of Newark, Licking County, Ohio, from that of GC General Commercial Zoning District to Limited Industrial District, zoning code of the City of Newark, Ohio.
Mr. Chair, it'd be the same as the ordinance above it. Just ask you to pass it on to the planning commission. Let's take a look at it. We'll render an opinion on it.
Fair enough.
Motion.
Motion by Hodger,
Second.
seconded by Blind. Questions from the committee? From the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Close, same sign. That'll pass, we'll vote 5-0. Up next will be resolution number 22-58. I'm sorry, ordinance 22-58. An ordinance changing the zoning classification of certain real property generally described as 1425 Mount Vernon Road, parcel tax ID number 054-269934-00.002. City of Newark, Licking County, Ohio, from that of GC General Commercial Zoning District to LI Limited Industrial District, zoning code of the City of Newark, Ohio.
Mr. Chair, again, we just ask that you pass it to us and we'll come back with an opinion.
Motion.
Motion by Parker,
Second.
seconded by Hodger. Questions from the committee? Questions from the audience? Seeing none, all those in favor of passing this out of council, signify by saying aye. All opposed, same sign. That too will be forwarded on to council and planning commission for the vote of 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Up next, you were going to give us an update on the block system contract.
Yes, again, I always say to people, I like to read things 3 times before I really come up with an opinion on it. So I read this about a time and a half and I'm gonna read a little bit more on it. But the meeting held where Mr. Lang, Mr. Marmy, and Ms. Blind were in attendance with the law director's office. They had some questions, some changes were made to the contract, which makes people a little bit more comfortable. And John, if you want to elaborate on those a little bit, please move forward and do so.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Go ahead.
So, yeah, there were a few areas of the contract we identified that were particularly troubling, and I will thank our law director for doing a great job getting that meeting together. And I'll give Flock some credit. I think they were willing to work with us, which was unexpected. A lot of those software companies, they say, here's our terms, take it or leave it, right? So I think I feel better about moving forward with them, given how they were able to work with us. One of the biggest areas of concern we had was their use of aggregated data, and how they would might be able to commercialize that down the road. I thought our law director Moore did a great job of, I think, with just a few changes, a few little tweaks, really narrowed the scope of what they can do. So they're very narrow in what they can use the data for. It's really just limited to improving the system itself and for generally for crime prevention efforts. So I think there's going to be a real hard argument for them to make to really commercialize that data if somebody else buys them and wants to do something with it. The data from the city of Newark is going to be a bit more limited than the data they get from any other municipality that just signed their standard terms. So I think that was one important change that I think really addressed a lot of concerns we had. Another area that was addressed was with respect to facial recognition, biometric screening. They were very clear, the system we're getting doesn't do that. It will never do that. So we wanted to put language in the contract with some clarifications at the request of our safety director and our chief, just to give us a little flexibility there. But long story short, we've got limits in place. We're not going to be doing facial recognition anytime soon, at least without further discussion. So that was good. And then the third area that we didn't really address in the contract, but and I don't know if Water, if you want to speak to this any further, but we kind of looked through some of there are some Ohio Revised Code provisions with respect to limitations of liability that I think some of my initial concerns were certainly addressed by the legislator, the revised code that she had pulled up. A lot of that's not going to be enforceable. So I think we're in a pretty good spot when it comes to the contract. And again, want to thank the law director and Flock for working with us, because I think we ended up with a pretty good contract compared to other municipalities.
So just a little bit further on that, I'll read through this for about another day. If I have any more questions, I'll reach back out to Flock. And if I don't, I'll check with the chief one more time. If we're to sign it, we'll sign it. We'll implement it.
Director Moore, did you have anything you want to add?
No,
Chief?
absolutely, great.
Okay. Sounds good. Just excited to get it going forward.
Yep.
Very nice. Oh, Mr. Farmer.
Yeah, I just would like to comment, and I really appreciate our law director and also Councilman Lang. It's great to have two great attorneys kind of talking with these folks. And honest to goodness, Flock not only was receptive, but I think that they're going to end up taking a lot of suggestions and incorporating it into all of their contracts because of what these two individuals did. And I just think it's noteworthy that they really respected and appreciated what we were doing and what we questioned. And I thought it was just a fantastic conversation, fantastic meeting with a superb outcome. It was a win-win for both. I really thought it went great. So just wanted to comment and thank the two of them publicly.
Nice when two parties come to the table with common goal and are receptive. Very nice. All right, Mr. Rhodes, tell us what's going on Sherry Valley Road. I buy that road, there's a bridge. I buy there quite often. I see fairly limited activity.
Weekly meetings to keep the project moving forward. US Steel, US Bridge, they're constructing the bridge. It's a company out of Cambridge. And scheduled delivery of the bridge and portions by the end of January. Most of the foundation design work is completed. Foundation on the bridge will be put in through January, throughout the month of January. We also have to coordinate to get some trees removed and expose all the existing utilities so we don't have problems as we move forward. It looks like once the bridge is in place, it'll be asphalted, so it'll come down to when asphalt plants open, and when we could get asphalt down. Could be as late as April. Could be earlier. And keep you updated as we move along.
That. And West Main Street.
West Main Street, good news on West Main Street. And one, we didn't use any of the city's demo money, done by grant. Greg Ketter from the county has had overseen this job and worked with the administration and worked with the land bank in the county and worked with the developer. So we're hoping at the latest, and I use the term the latest because it could be before, Thursday at 3:30, West Main will be open.
Nice.
So those are the three updates I have.
And once it becomes open, there's nothing else they can do to that building that would cause a delay or
There
further
could be periodic closures, could be, but not for long lengths of time. And that'll be with further demolition and pulling it back.
That's great. Anybody else have any questions? Comments on those topics?
Thanks for the great news.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is good
all
news.
three.
Yeah. all three.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Rhodes. We appreciate the time and efforts. Finance Committee will stay adjourned. Up next will be personnel.
You mean service committee?
What they said. Whatever committee this was, we're adjourned. Service adjourned. Personnel is that. You think that's that part, right?
Yeah. See, thank you.
All right, we'll commence the Personnel Committee. Those present are myself, Ryan Hottinger, Levitas, Barker, and Brian. Just one item on the agenda tonight. We've got ordinance 22-56, an ordinance amending the position classification pay range and department authorization tables of the city of Newark, Department of Safety, Division of Police by creating the position of criminalist, abolishing the positions of 2 communications operators, 3 communications operator 1s, 7 communication operator 2, 1 crime prevention coordinator, 1 forensic scientist, 1 parking meter repair worker, and 1 police communications supervisor, and setting the compensation therefore. Mr. Spurgeon.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, hope the day finds you well. The piece before you asked me support to do 2 things. We do wish to create a criminalist. So Chief McKee and his command staff have an opportunity to review their organization and believe some changes are in order. Director Hickman believes they are as well, and I agree. We currently have a sworn police officer analyzing evidence, testifying, helping hold guilty parties to account. As we're doing some succession planning, we'd like to put that person on the street when a new asset comes in, strictly a scientific mind. So that's the overall strategy, is put the police officer on the street fighting crime, get a scientific mind in here to be our criminalist. I don't know if it pleases the committee, but I took the liberty of some position descriptions if you'd like to pass them over. And you'll notice, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, this is a degreed position, scientific mind, processing evidence, so on and so forth. So certainly urge your support to send that to council. Have Chief McKee here if you have any more technical questions, but there's a second dynamic to this piece of legislation we're pretty proud of. I want to thank the auditor and our law director. It's comprehensive, but Director Hickman said, Bill, let's get it in there. In every position we're not going to use, let's abolish them. So we're proud of the fact we're asking for 1 position, we're abolishing 16. This was done, and we engaged our business partners in the national bargaining unit, make sure they were comfortable in these positions being classified, being abolished, and we're good to go. So we're pretty proud of the operation to clean up our books as well.
Thank you, Mr. Spurgeon. Any discussion from the committee?
Offer motion.
Motion by Barker. Second by Ryan. Any questions from the committee? Sandra?
So the ones that you're abolishing, those just haven't been filled ever, or they were once filled and they're no longer, or what's the history on that?
Both. So through the chair to Mrs. Hodger, great question. So one thing I realized is as the new HR director 3 years ago, getting your hands around legislative positions, what's out there. It wasn't the easiest task, which is why I want to thank our auditor's office publicly. So these, yes, on the books at one time, parking meter enforcement. Used it. Well, that's a different animal now. It's a SID, different method. So we've abolished some of those. So it's a blend. Some of them things have changed. They're no longer needed. Some needed in the past we just weren't using.
So none of these are ones that could possibly use in the future.
And that's why we engage our partners in the bargaining unit, just to make sure they were comfortable. They have a material interest in these positions. And that's certainly strategic decisions of Director Hickman and Chief McKee. We've had a lot of discussions and we're pretty comfortable abolishing the positions we brought before you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Any questions from the audience? Thank you. And I will just add, I appreciate the effort to go through and clean up as we go along. I think we need to get all those empty positions off the books. So thank you for doing that as
Our pleasure. Thank you.
All right, well, if there's no further discussion, we'll put this to a vote. All those in favor sending on to full council signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That passes 5-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
This committee stands adjourned. Full council will commence at 7.